Well, officials here and in Lesotho are now planning to shut down one of the major tunnels that transfers water from Lesotho to Gauteng for 6 months. It's described as scheduled maintenance. It happens in October. There have been plans in place for a long time to do this. Officials say Gauteng and the surrounding areas won't run dry. In the meantime, Benoît Leroy is the CEO of the SA Water Chamber. Benoît, good afternoon to you. We all know how important the water from Lesotho is for Gauteng. Why is this tunnel being closed? What kind of maintenance has to be done?
Hi, Stephen, and to the viewers. It's preventative maintenance, so we should applaud it and laud it that it's actually being done. 5 years ago, they noticed some corrosion in the tunnel that is steel lined. It's a concrete tunnel that's steel lined, and some of the lining has to be replaced as a preventative measure so that we don't have a catastrophic collapse. So it's no panic stations at all. It's routine maintenance, and it's being done before it fails. So we're not running to fail like many other things.
Can we be sure it'll only take 6 months? They won't find some major problem?
So in 2019, they found the issues, and they think this will probably be done in 4 to 5 months. So as most project managers do, they always add a bit of contingency. So I'm quite confident it'll be done in time, if not a little bit early.
What kind of contingency plans do they make in the meantime? So you're pumping water through a tunnel. I presume you do it at the right time so that there's plenty of water left over for Gauteng.
You know, the integrated Vaal River system is not well known in the public. It's upwards of 14 dams. And if you look at the Vaal Dam, it's very shallow, a very wide area. So it loses huge percentages, sometimes up to 50% in summer in evaporation, which is the biggest consumer. So it's always kept at its natural level. And when it gets to below 20%, I think it's about 18% is the rule, we start adding in from Sterkfontein, which is the same volume. They're about 2.6 billion cubic meters each. So they're really, really large. Sterkfontein's at very high altitude, where it has a very low surface area, so it doesn't evaporate much. And most of that water is in actual fact transferred from the Tugela. So it's always kept at 95, around about 95%. So we've got 1 to 2 years worth of water there. But there's still another 12 or 13 dams. So, we've got a very sophisticated interbasin transfer system, the second biggest in the world. Until 15 years ago, it was the biggest. The Chinese overtook us. And this is 10 times our size. So we don't really have issues. The issues will come in after this, when we don't have good rainfall for a few years, etc. But we've got that storage battery in Sterkfontein. And so we're not going to feel anything in Gauteng from that perspective.
When you have a tunnel that's this big and so much water goes through it, and I presume it's sort of pumped through, but water's moving through it all the time, and does that mean that the material that the water comes into contact with is the kind of material that is comfortable with water? What I'm trying to get to is, if you then stop pumping water through it, is there a problem if the tunnel almost dries out? Do you need to be quite careful about making sure it doesn't dry out too much, or does it not work like that at all?
No, it's gravity fed from the dams. And which is it's a very clever scheme. It's a concrete lined tunnel, so it's normal boring that you do to go through the mountains, so through the Alps, for example, in Europe. So it's a concrete lined tunnel, and inside you've got a steel lining. So it's very much like our steel pipes we have to convey Rand Water's 140-kilometer water up to Rustenburg, for example. So it's made for that. And when there's no water in it, these are lined. Okay, so there's absolutely nothing. It's not going to react with the atmosphere, in a negative manner or anything like this. So it's just a very strong steel pipe. It does wear down. We do get abrasion, and you allow for that in what we call the corrosion thickness. So a certain amount of corrosion does take place. We allow for that, and then we reline the parts that we need to. So it's purpose manufactured. There's nothing untoward towards it, but I know there's a trust deficit. So we're all taking this information, and we should question it always. Nothing is good to raise the visibility.
It's also just fascinating to look at the engineering of this. Does it matter what time of year you do it? In other words, it doesn't rain all the time in Gauteng. It does rain quite a lot in Lesotho, which is why we asked them for their water, and we have this plan. Are there certain times of year when it's better to do it because of the way the rain falls in Lesotho?
So I think what's quite good here is that we're doing it just before the rainy season. And the dams at the moment, the integrated Vaal River system last week was at about 85 or 86 which is really, really high. Little bit, couple of percentage points less than last year, but we're way above the norm. So we've got a lot. We've done maintenance with much lower levels. When the rains start coming, the system will start filling up and get to over 100% like it did. You know, the whole system was over 100% this year, 110 at times. So yeah, it helps to do it at the right time, and I think it's at the sweet spot.
Okay. There are plans underway for the second phase of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, and that project is going to get going. I presume that'll be a second tunnel. Would it be different from the first? Is it a different system?
So it's more dams, more tunnels, more hydroelectric. And I think there's up to 4 or 5. You know, this was all conceived in the 1950s, 1960s, and we started it in the 1990s. So, you know, it's all very long term, but it will be similar, new dams to store the water in the mountains where there's low evaporation, and then to push it through tunnels by gravity and to do hydroelectric, which is one of the important parts for Lesotho, because Lesotho doesn't have much of its own electricity. It is dependent on Eskom, and we know that that's limited. So it's going to add a bit of hydro also to it. So yes, so it's, and these phases will carry on until such time as the water yields, reach their optimum. So it is finite. I personally think that we'll probably go up to stage 3 in our lifetimes anyway.
In other words, the demand for water in Gauteng is going to be so big that there'll be more kind of stages. Does Lesotho really have so much rain that it can supply all of Gauteng? I mean, it's a population much bigger than Lesotho's population.
Yeah, Lesotho is about 2 million and we're about 15 here, but it's also snow melt. So it has, you know, it has the, let's say, the fronts that come from the Indian Ocean that hit the mountains and cause precipitation, but also snow. There's also the snow melt, and quite a lot goes into the ground, which is accessible for, you know, for the local population. But we also transfer from the Tugela uphill over near Harrismith into Sterkfontein. So we do have those interbasins, and we do transfer from the Gariep Dam into the Eastern Cape through the tunnel there. So, you know, it's all interconnected. But you must remember that the Vaal also has a big catchment area. It's got the Free State, small part of Gauteng, and it's got Mpumalanga where it originates from. So it's not, we're not all dependent on that, but we're going to have to become smarter in reducing our water demand footprint, non-revenue water, that one, and also reusing as much as possible. So there are a lot of schemes in place. We just hope that we can get going with them.
Benoît Leroy, thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate the time. The head of the SA Water Chamber, the CEO there. Well, important conversations, of course, around how water works, how you get your water in the Gauteng and the surrounding province.